Buenos días, Andrea.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to TLC Live as every Wednesday at 11. Today, 11. Un poquito más que 11.
Boy, you're a firecracker today.
Oh, yeah, I'm full of energy. I don't know, I'm happy. It's going to be your birthday tomorrow, and it's my birthday in 2 weeks. So, October
I
is been amazing.
I don't have any more bird days. That's bird 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 day.
Birthday,
It's
cumpleaños,
birth
cumpleaños.
birth
Bird, bird,
birth. There
bird,
we go.
bird.
Hey everybody, welcome. Appreciate you joining us. Today is a very interesting day. First of all, I'm going to give you a few program notes. We're going back down to South Texas, and we're going to have the chairwoman of the Hidalgo County Republican Party and the chairwoman of the Cameron County Republican Party with us, and anybody else that wants to jump in. So we're going to talk about what's going on down in South Texas. But I may have to slip out in the middle of this program. In an adjacent room to this studio, I am on standby to testify in the House Committee on Redistricting in Texas on Senate Bill 6. And they called the hearing yesterday. The window to sign up was the deadline to sign up for online testimony was last night at 10 p.m. So I had dinner with some friends. I went back to the office at 9:30 p.m.
Wow.
and managed to sign up to speak. So I am going to be a witness on the show. And if the chairman, I'm sorry, on the committee hearing, and if the chairman calls me, I'm literally going to take out this IFP and IFB and go to testify, and then I'll jump back in. So that's
So
just
I'm
the
gonna be with the
program.
ladies. So the ladies need to help me to carry the show.
That's right. They're going to be your co-hosts.
Okay.
So why don't you introduce our spectacular guests?
Well, two beautiful women because you're always surrounded with beautiful women, and that's what you like. So we have a Adrienne Peña Garza. She's the chairwoman Hidalgo County Republican Party, and also we have Morgan Cisneros Graham. That today she doesn't have technical issues, and she is the chair of the Cameron County. So welcome, ladies. Beautiful, smart, and powerful, and encouraging, and role model women. That women. It's amazing everything that women these days are doing. Last night I was at an event and it was full of women, all successful, and mothers, wives, and also professional.
Yeah.
So that's why women.
So, yeah, so everybody wants to know all this transformation and transition in Texas from traditional ways of the way Latinos used to work, Tejanos, Hispanics. And I always say, cuando las damas se involucran, sacan las chanclas and things change.
Ah, no, claro, y además que somos multitask, podemos hacer de todo,
Yeah,
no como ustedes.
like you.
Exactly.
So, Adrienne and Morgan, welcome. Great to have you on the program. As
Thank
you
you for having
know,
us.
yeah, we're all involved in a very important process that we go through every decade, and that's redistricting, or better known as reapportionment in Texas. I can tell you that I am somewhat disappointed, frankly, extremely disappointed in the maps that came out of the Texas Senate that are now being heard in committee hearings in the Texas House. Let me begin with Adrienne. Adrienne, what is your assessment of the maps, and in your opinion, can they be improved?
Oh, definitely, especially in House District 41. We've been working that district for over 10 years, and we are pleased, somewhat pleased with CD 15. I know that CD 34, which is, we do have a swivel of CD 34, and we have candidates like Myra Flores that have been working tirelessly on the ground. And I think it's proof that if you invest a little bit in South Texas, that more and more people will be voting Republican. And so we want a more balanced district. And unfortunately, in that congressional district, we do not have that, neither in House District 41. But it's definitely, we need to have more conversations about what's going on below south of San Antonio.
I agree. Morgan?
Well, as we know, yesterday we had some last minute surprises in terms of House districts, especially in Cameron County. What happened with 35, 37, and 38 being very much unexpected by some, and coming in at the end is something of a compromise. So things were looking better, things were looking worse, and then they got better and better. And we do now have some competitive options in terms of the state rep races. I agree with my colleague with regards to Congressional District 34. We were very disappointed with what was presented earlier. To many voters, especially ours, and also some independents who want something different, have been under the Democratic boot for so many years, it felt like our own folks were moving the goalpost after seeing all of these tremendous changes. And interestingly enough, a lot of the folks who are calling things unfair are upset that they aren't as one-sided as they were before in some cases. So we do have some good news that came out of it, some that isn't, but the entirety of Cameron County is in 34, and so it will require that Myra be able to take 34, assuming, of course, she prevails in the primary, and based upon the race that she's running, I'm pretty confident that we'll see that happen.
First of all, I tip my hat to the members of the Senate and the House that are involved in the redistricting process and sitting through the reapportionment process is a convoluted process. I want everybody that's watching us to understand this is not easy. I mean, there are several constitutional requirements. There are several Voting Rights Act requirements. You have to keep communities of interest together. The Constitution calls for the districts to be compact and contiguous. They want you to take the racial composition, the ethnic composition into account. So there is a whole host of issues that come into this. And then, of course, the Attorney General of the state of Texas will have to be prepared to defend these in the event that there is a lawsuit. Here's my issue, Morgan and Adrienne. I've been involved in politics for over 25 years in Texas, and the explosive growth of the population in Texas has been driven by what the liberals like to call people of color. I call them Texans, right? Because I don't like to divide. But the fact of the matter is that the requirements of the Voting Rights Act does want you to take into consideration communities of interest, both racial and ethnic. Okay, that's not my decision. That's court case decisions. Here's the problem. Republicans in this state, or at least in the Texas House, made up of members of both parties, are operating and looking at these maps based on traditional arguments that, for example, Hispanics' choice for representation has historically been Democrats. And they're currently operating under that paradigm. That paradigm has now shifted. You can no longer say in Texas that Hispanics, Tejanos, Latinos, whatever you want to call us, vote strictly for one political party. It is evident to me, and that's why we have these two ladies, that paradigm, that model is shifting. And so we cannot use that as a legal argument any longer. And my sense is that the state of Texas is not prepared to lead on that legal argument in federal court, perhaps before a 3-judge panel will ultimately go to. And so we're delighted to have both of you on, and you can talk about this paradigm shift, because both of you ladies have seen and lived in South Texas, where historically, our communities, your communities, voted Democrat. And in fact, I think, Adrienne, you probably had family members that were Democrats. If I'm not mistaken, I think your father served honorably in Texas as a Democrat. But that's shifted, right?
Oh, definitely. I walked away from the Democratic Party and helped give the Republicans a supermajority, and we have all been following his lead since. Going back to what you said about the Democrats' old talking point of, Democrats being disenfranchised in reference to lines. I think it's actually Hispanic Republicans that are disenfranchised.
There's no
We've been
question.
we've been forced to vote Democrat. There's no opportunity here. I mean, honestly, in reference to Hidalgo County, if we don't have a balanced and fair district, then it's Hispanic Republicans that are the minority that are being disenfranchised when they butcher these maps.
So,
Very well stated, Adrienne. I couldn't have said that better myself.
so Adrienne, going back to the point that Orlando was talking about your family being a Democrat, and tell us a little bit about that background and when you realize that you want to walk away from that party.
Well, I do believe that my father switching did help open my eyes, but I went to college after being married and having my kids, and I took an intro to political science class, and I learned a little bit more about the political spectrum. And I think if more and more Hispanics in the Valley, Texans in the Valley, Tejanos in the Valley, like Orlando said, whatever it is that you want to label yourself as, if they were to, properly take the time to look at the Republican Party, they would be Republican. I mean, Hispanics on the border are conservative, and I'm hoping that more and more of these, I want to say donors as well, because without money, we can't do very much in the Valley as far as turning out the vote. But instead of embracing this conservative Democrat mentality, that you encourage them to walk away, because I think there's some in office that are on the wrong side of the aisle.
What about you, Morgan?
In terms of family that has been
Yeah, your
Democrat
family
before,
and your background, and why you identify yourself more with the conservative side.
I do come from a very conservative family. To my family that I've grown up with and the culture is Hispanic, and I'm down here. I do have some relatives who are elected Democrats at this time, and of those who are, they lean to the conservative side, but they do indeed have some misconceptions with regards to what the priorities of the Republican Party is. But I am seeing a shift. As for myself, I was raised not being told what party to have allegiance to or how to feel about it. However, when I was in high school, I started public science, no less. I started a Young Conservatives Club. It was Hannah High School, and very quickly we saw staff members running to go sponsor a Young Liberals Club. I think they called it progressive, so at least they were honest. Um, but there are indeed those who have not been heard for so long. I think we've been underestimated for quite a while. And also, we have that silent conservative Republican and even conservative Democrat and independent populace that gets kind of forgotten about. So when it comes to some of the numbers that they're working on, when we have a district that's 81% Hispanic, and we have people complaining that, maybe 48% Republican by the time things are done, if anything, they're indeed advocating to disenfranchise people on the basis of how they may vote. It's something that argument can be used both ways, and it needs to be very heavily reconsidered. And I do see that the changes that are underway are a lot more, at least in the case of our county, and I know many people all over the state are very unhappy with the process, and I don't blame them. But in terms of our county and changes that we've seen, we do see that it's a little more reflective of the new numbers. It doesn't mean that it will be handed to us, however. I think that we have a lot of entities that are far too optimistic just because of how we did last year during the general election. And the Democrats aren't going to be taking this area for granted anymore. They have tremendous resource that we have never seen the likes of, any of us here in any Republican organization here in the Rio Grande Valley. So it's always been an uphill battle. We're used to having to fight uphill battles, and we're used to having to run things with a very tight belt. And that's going to continue into next year's general as well. I am so sorry. This guy.
All right. One of the concerns I have, I've been in Texas along the Rio Grande since 1976, and I served at Laughlin Air Force Base, which is in Del Rio, Texas, and have a lot of friends in the RGV, Maverick County, Demet County, and whatnot. So here's one of the issues that people need to understand. As the census data was dumped on us, we realized that Texas was going to gain 2 congressional seats. And the growth in Texas is, to use again a very liberal term, uh, is based on the growth of diverse communities, people of color. Again, I call them Texans. But this is why, and what's troubling is I think we're going from like 69 Caucasian representatives in the Texas House to 80, based on the current maps. That's the Texas House of Representative maps. But with respect to the congressional maps, which I'm about to go testify in a moment, this is how the Latinos, Hispanics, Tejanos, whatever you want to call us, are disenfranchised, not only politically, but in terms of important issues facing our communities. Members of Congress are tasked, they're the only ones that have the authority to change immigration laws. Congress hasn't focused on immigration law since 1986 when Ronald Reagan signed the Adjustment Act.
Mm-hmm.
And so our friends down in South Texas are bearing the brunt of Congress's inability to either tackle the issue or work together, which is their job, to fix the problems facing Texas. And now, based on these congressional maps, they're moving the diverse communities of South Texas into congressional districts to protect, allegedly, the potential growth in Travis County. Now, tell me how that's fair to the communities in South Texas that are bearing the brunt of not only illegal immigration, but there are specific issues that are important to the Latino community that are not being addressed by members of Congress. Let me just begin by saying health care. We have huge needs in the Latino community with respect to health care. Diabetes, too, and obesity is out of control. Now, I know government can't do anything about the way you eat, but there are public policies that affect the economic viability of communities that create food deserts and the inability for those communities to have good, healthy choices. So economic prosperity is something that Congress should be worried about. With respect to education in Texas, everybody knows that, especially in urban areas, Latinos have a huge dropout rate. Let me repeat that, a huge dropout rate. That's bad news for the taxpayers. That's bad news for the economic prosperity of Texas in the future. And it's very bad news for those kids that decide to drop out of school. So on immigration, on health care, on education, on crime, for God's sakes, our communities, whether they be urban or rural, like South Texas, are being overrun by the criminal activity of drug cartels, human smugglers, sex traffickers, and in the urban areas, we're being led by liberals who are creating a turnstile system, giving people giving criminals, alleged criminals, a turnstile system that they don't even have to post a bond to appear in court. So these people charged with crimes are put back into our communities to commit more heinous crimes. So crime, education, healthcare, immigration, those issues need to be addressed in the largest growing community in Texas. And unfortunately, these congressional maps are not helping the Latino community in Texas. That's my opinion, and that's why I'm going to step out in a little bit.
No, thank you for saying that. I think another area where we haven't failed, unfortunately, it does fall down to our party. I'm saying this as a state committee woman. I do represent Senate District 27 at, on the governing body of the Republican Party of Texas. And my partner is Carlos Gasquez, who's one of the most experienced people when it comes to border matters. I mean, he chaired the Border Security Council. Yet when we're talking about border policy and what the party can do to guide that, and also working with our congressmen and our representatives, we have people who have never seen the border in their life, not only speaking for our community, but also Hispanics in general, saying, well, the Hispanics feel this way, the Hispanics feel that way. And what we need to do as Hispanics, as especially Hispanic Republicans, is we need to start getting definitely more active in our party and also the platform process. One of the things that you mentioned is something I'm very passionate about, and it's looking at it from the approach of, hey, these progressive immigration policies or stances are incentivizing human trafficking and human rights violations. Unfortunately, when this argument's made to our party or some of the other members of the party, they look at it as being too soft and too touchy-feely, when the fact is they don't care about that aspect. They're focusing on, oh, these awful, illegals are taking our jobs and leeching off the system. That turns off the independent voters, especially, who are the ones responsible for getting people elected. So as we're talking about Hispanic issues, Hispanic views, and the fact that we're quickly approaching this majority status in other parts of the state, we need to make sure that we're represented far better within our party and its platform. One of the very practical solutions you mentioned to immigration policy, that was something that was part of the state party platform back in 2014 that was dropped. We called it the Texas solution. That was something that flourished under Perry, and it did have a lot of very pragmatic points to it. Unfortunately, people who were not from the border area, unfamiliar with it, and who also have no familiarity with our industry here in the state, were responsible for defeating that. And this stuff really does have effect on policy at some point. So everything you're pointing out can also be addressed if we demand that our party represent us more than it has in the past.
Yeah, let me just say, Morgan, because you brought up something, and I say this all the time. I may have said it before to you ladies, but the failure of the conservatives, the Republicans in Texas, to lead on immigration, significant immigration reform. First of all, let me say that we as conservatives, first and foremost, want strong border security. That means that we want everybody to comply with our laws, and let's stop these waves of people just storming the Rio Grande River and just coming across. But let me say this. The conservatives' inability to lead on immigration reform, and they've had opportunities because now they're going to say, well, we're not the majority. We get that. But that should not stop the conservatives in Congress from positing immigration reform measures. They won't do it. They're afraid. And what happens is that the majority of the population in Texas looks at all of us, Hispanics, as illegal aliens. I mean, that's a broad brush approach, but it puts the Hispanic community in a very unfavorable light when most of us are law-abiding, conservative, patriotic Americans. But the fact of the matter is that, and I'm going to say this, and you ladies don't have to agree, but it puts a negative light on people of color, our Tejanos, our wonderful Mexican Americans that are patriotic and have been here for generations. But a lot of the population will look at them as just, oh, they're illegal aliens. No, they're not. They're Texans. They're taxpayers. They serve in the military. They serve on Customs and Border Patrol. They're our deputy sheriffs. They are our DPS agents. And so by Congress not addressing this, it casts all of us in a very negative light. That's just my opinion. If you ladies want to jump in on that, you certainly can.
Let's start with Adrienne.
So I think the only thing, and I agree with what you said, but I think it's fairly difficult when you have asylum laws that are being abused, and until that comes to a stop, I don't think we're going to be able to sit at the table and compromise about anything else. I mean, there's people that shop here, or they used to shop here before COVID, that work here, and they're not allowed to right now. On the other hand, you have asylum seekers. I think that's being abused to the extreme. And until that is fixed, I don't see any compromise on immigration.
Yeah, and you know what's dumbfounding to me, Adrienne, is that, again, people don't understand this. You remember a couple of weeks ago in Del Rio, Texas, when there were over 7,000 Haitians underneath the bridge at the Rio Grande in Del Rio. What does the U.S. government do? They closed the international bridge, which punished the good people of Acuña, Mexico, in the state of Coahuila, and the good people of Valverde County and Del Rio. It literally stopped commerce. That was the American, our congressional immigration policy reaction was punish the law-abiding citizens of South Texas and Del Rio and Acuna, close down the bridge so we can deal with this issue. Kamala Harris wasn't here, Joe Biden wasn't here, and thank God that the governor sent in, the task force, which is our state troopers. But think about that. We have over 600 state troopers down in South Texas and Del Rio. There is no housing for them. We don't have the hotel capacity. So now the community in South Texas has an online portal where you can donate a bedroom in your house to house CBP agents and DPS agents because it is out of control. So just that policy of shutting down the bridge, shutting down the economy in South Texas, and hurting taxpayers and American citizens is beyond me. And the fact that, as you all say, these members of Congress live in, Boston and Milwaukee and St. Louis and Chicago, and most of our congressional delegation lives in Austin or, in Dallas, DFW, El Paso, up in the Panhandle. They don't know what's going on down there. Yeah, they'll get some images that the liberal left media wants, these poor immigrants that are just coming to apply for asylum. Come on, guys. There's a proper way to apply for asylum, and it isn't storming our border.
Agreed, Orlando, 100%. Sorry.
I'm
So-
hearing some of the same complaints for Democrats as well. I mean, we do have conservative Democrats in our area and
No question.
who are not happy with the situation. They do believe that it puts them in a negative light, and they're having an issue with it. The problem is they're not holding the congressmen that they themselves have helped get elected basically accountable for the fact that they are more loyal to their masters at the DNC and at the national level than they are their own constituents.
No
We saw the
question,
same
Morgan.
things.
And again, this is why I remind people that this is a congressionally manufactured problem. Congress has sat around since 1986 and not made any significant changes to our immigration laws. It's convenient and easy to blame Trump. It's easy and convenient to blame Biden, Kamala Harris, but the executive branch does not have the tools, doesn't have the laws, to deal with this. I mean, our immigration laws are outdated. Congress needs to get serious. The Texas congressional delegation needs to get serious. And what I mean by serious is it's not good enough for John Cornyn and Ted Cruz to go down to the Rio Grande River and take a picture of themselves on a DPS or CBP gunboat. That is not effective policy making. And so it's time for Texas to roll up their sleeves, and it's time for the House committee today to recognize that South Texas, Latinos, and Hispanics in Texas in general need a voice in the political process.
And I think it's a long way, to see real results. But I want to hear from both of you guys. What I was listening to you, Morgan. You said in high school you were creating the conservative club, and we need more of these in schools. We need more in education. But tell us what you guys been doing and working together with your team and the people in South Texas to make a difference.
Oh, we're starting with me or Adrienne? I know she has a lot going on.
Either one.
Yeah, maybe we can start with you.
So at this time, the Rio Grande Valley is the place. We have entities from all over the state as well as the nation that are getting involved in Cameron, Hidalgo, and actually several of the larger border counties. So what we're doing here in Cameron, and I have to speak somewhat for also our Senate district, is working with groups such as Project Red Tex, the Texas Republican Initiative, and many others as well as even some of our candidates, Myra Flores, as well as the Texas Young Republicans, the Republican Party of Texas, you lovely people, and many more, in terms of recruiting volunteers, recruiting candidates very intelligently, and making sure that we have the best foot forward when it comes to recruiting these individuals. And not only that, but making sure that they're funded. The Associated Republicans of Texas has invested quite heavily into our House district races. We're seeing that the RNC has taken a great interest in our area as well. And making sure that all of these new entities coming in are not in cross purposes with each other, so that we can make sure that we are not reaching any point of saturation and that all of these resources are being used wisely. So a lot of this has to do also with the fact that we can register people to vote, but if we don't actually get our people out to vote, that's another problem, and it's going to undermine everything that we're trying to accomplish. The Democrats have the advantage, of course, of having our county leadership, which means they control our elections office, which means that taxpayer resources are used in terms of voter registration. They're not going to show up where they can just register anybody who needs to be registered. They're going to go to specific places where they know somebody's more likely to vote Democrat. So what we're working on and have done is trained over 100 voter registrars. We're making sure that they are hitting a lot of the unregistered but eligible to vote populations, and that we're making sure that those folks are also going to be highly likely to vote for our candidates. So those efforts are a huge part of what we need to do, because we can run candidates, we can throw tons of money at it, which is going to be, it reaches a point of saturation. But if we don't actually have people turning out, and both of our counties do have a very low turnout on both sides, then it's going to be for naught. And so a lot of our efforts are going to be focused there as well.
Now your turn, Adrienne.
Yes, very well said, Chairman Graham. One of the things that we're doing, or a lot of the things that we're doing, is we're kind of adapted to really being alone and not getting any resources. And so we've decided we need to be our own superheroes. We need to figure out ways, creative ways, to get attention from people outside of Hidalgo County, outside of South Texas, because without resources, we can't continue to do all the great things that we have done. And so if you visit our Hidalgo County GOP website or social media, you'll see we have constant events and have consistently for the past 4 years, going on and on with community events, letting people know that Republicans are not demons. We look a lot like you, and we care. Many of us are humanitarians. Many of us give back in different ways. What is unique about our GOP is that we have committee chairs, committee chairs from different factions within the Republican Party, whether it's a traditional conservative or libertarian Republican, or, a grand old party Republican, the new growth opportunity prosperity Republican. We're trying to bring everyone in and give them a seat at the table, because when we empower these committees, they're going to go out into their own factions and bring in more votes. And that's what we want. We're hoping to spend a lot more time on the ground, knocking on doors, phone banking, and connecting with voters, because we feel very confident that when we do that, when we invest in that, they will be voting more and more Republican. I think it's the lack of investment is the reason why we haven't won an election. And our goal for the past 4 years was to focus primarily on House District 41, and now the lines are kind of cooked already, which is very, very unfortunate. It kind of sends a message that our hard work is not as important. And unfortunately, with a lot of elected officials, the grassroots aren't very important, and we're here to change that. The grassroots is very important, and we should be encouraging individual freedom and giving everyone a voice, encouraging more people to run for office, training them. We have our grand opening on Thursday with Chairman Matt Rinaldi and former Trump advisor Eric Moraham. Having events like that, I think, shows excitement. But when we do have more and more people outside the Valley investing in the Valley, it lets the people that are the closet Republicans or the quiet independent conservatives to know it's okay to come out. Come join us. We're not abrasive. We're not aggressive. we're welcoming, and we care about the community. We care about our friends that are conservative Democrats as well, but we have a job to do, and that is the Republican primary, which is to grow Republican votes in the primary. And by putting more and more Hispanics on the ballot, more independent conservatives on the ballot, more Texans on the ballot here in South Texas, we're going to continue to grow the party. A lot of people will say that it's just because of Trump that we did well. We'll pay attention to South Texas because that's going to change. We're going to continue to grow the party, spread the message, identify more candidates like Monica de la Cruz Hernandez, like Myra Flores, who both actually were, groomed in our county GOP. And it goes to investing in the grassroots. We have office hours. We open our doors. This is a full-time job, and it has been for our team for the past 4 years. And we're going to press harder, and we're going to keep going. And we're really excited. There's some great news to come, but we're going to have a trunk or treat for Halloween. We're going to have a Thanksgiving potluck. We're going to have a Christmas Red Santa for the kids in the colonias here in the Valley. There's a lot going on, and we're really grateful for TLC, for highlighting what we've been doing and highlighting our candidates. But there's much more to come, so stay tuned.
Well, you're absolutely right, and there's some great things happening down just north of you as well. As you know, the chairwoman of the Nueces County Republican Party is organizing a big pachanga down in Nueces County, so we're excited about that. We're going to jump in and help Barbie Baker down there. But you're right, Adrienne, and the important thing is what I'm so optimistic about is that you guys have really taken the bull by the horn. You've taken the leadership position because historically, as you know, sometimes there wasn't, we weren't working together in Texas as conservative Hispanics. But what's fascinating to me now, and I'll call everybody out, Bienvenido and RNHA and HRT and, Hispanic Leadership Alliance and TLC and Americans for Prosperity. Everybody is now realizing that we're stronger working together, and so that's why I'm always amazed and appreciate the welcoming both of you guys give us when we come down there. As we always said, we told Barbie Baker, we tell Morgan, we tell Adrienne, we're not down there to take over. We're down there to see what we can do. If you guys need us, we'll be there. We raise resources to help you guys, and so I'm excited about the future and about y'all's ability to lead Texas into the future as a conservative state that recognizes our constitutional principles, our liberties and our freedom, respects our families, and allows our children to live in an environment in which they and their children can prosper. Now, we do have some challenges, and this article was brought to my attention. And I don't know if you have and Morgan have seen this, but this was in the Federalist, and the title of the article was, "The 2020 election wasn't stolen, it was bought by Mark Zuckerberg." And I'm not going to read it because it's a long article by William Doyle of the Federalist, but what was staggering, Morgan and Adrienne, is I don't know if you guys know, but they have done a deep research. Mark Zuckerberg spent $420 million organizing a couple organizations called Civic Life, the Center for Technology and Civic Life, and the Center for Election Innovation and Research, and worked hand in hand with the liberal Democrats in urban areas to turn out liberal voters. And so Houston was a recipient of those funds from Zuckerberg and the social media liberals out in California. And so I'm just sharing with you, let me just see if I can pull this up. They spent an inordinate amount of money in Webb County. The next largest expenditure was in Dallas County. Then the third largest expenditure by Mark Zuckerberg was in your neck of the woods, Morgan, in Cameron County, and then finally in Harris County. Wow. Those are the top counties where they had a pretty big impact. And so that's what we're facing. That's what conservatives are facing. That's what the Republican Party is facing, is $500 million. Let me repeat that. Nearly $500 million to organize, using artificial intelligence, big data to get people out to the polls that will support the liberal Democrats that are positing policies that are ruining our communities. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't know the first thing about South Texas. He's probably out in California and San Francisco
Yeah,
riding around in his private jet.
of course.
But he is making sure that our country becomes destabilized along with their friends at Twitter and all the other social media platforms. So I salute you ladies for what y'all are doing. You've got a Herculean task ahead of you. You got Morgan who's going head to head with Mark Zuckerberg and his tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So I hope you ladies are prepared. We're in the fight with you, and we're excited about it.
And that's something very important that Adrienne mentioned when she was talking, and she said we have a lack of investment. And if we have this guy investing that kind of money, I mean, how do we gonna fight that when we have a lack of investment? And the lack of investment, it's not that something that is going on right now. We've been seeing that lack of investment in the conservative side for decades. So it's a huge and big challenge, not only for the community in general, but now with the schools that we're seeing that it's getting.
Yeah. Andrea, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm going to read just a sentence from the article, which has been well researched. It says the practical effect of these massive, privately manipulated election office funding disparities was to create a shadow election system with a built-in structural bias that systematically favored Democrat voters over Republican voters. And that's what y'all have to realize. You know, when Mark Zuckerberg works hand in hand with the offices that are tasked with overseeing and administering elections in Texas and across the country, it's no longer a fair election. Let me repeat, it's no longer a fair election. And you wonder why in our county, ladies, Harris County, we elected a very liberal, I mean left-leaning liberal, Lina Hidalgo as the county judge. She stripped away the election what am I looking for? Responsibilities from our elected officials, from our district clerk, from our voter registrar being our tax assessor collector, and created her own office of voter election. Now, if conservatives and as Republicans don't see this across the state of Texas, that now these newly created positions that are not accountable to the elected people are working hand in hand with liberal social media platforms that are dumping $500 million into our election. My God, I don't know that if we deserve to win. So it's time to fight. And this is what we're up against, guys. Every conservative in this state needs to realize that and stand up and organize, get registered, go vote, make sure your children vote, your neighbors vote, and this is how we're going to take Texas back.
You're absolutely right. When it came to our generals last year, one of the things that we also experienced, at least here in Cameron, was a lot of money brought in by the Arnold Schwarzenegger Foundation. And they did work directly with our elections department. And it was mostly earmarked for things such as drive-through voting and very specific initiatives that we know are heavily favored by those same folks. And you all saw this in Harris, that will make sure to disproportionately place polling places based upon, you know, what party people tend to lean toward. And you're absolutely right. They will use every public resource without reservation in order to stack the deck against us. And this is why it's incredibly important for county chairs. Adrienne knows how this goes as well. When you're on that election commission, to keep track constantly of what it is that's happening on the Democrat side of the aisle. What their conversations are, what it is they're afraid of. Now we know that there are a number of Democrats who are having meltdowns over, you know, the map that passed yesterday. Things like that we need to know, because not only will we know what their next steps are, but also the weak spots, where the vulnerabilities are as well. We have to start not just working harder in some places, but also smarter.
I'm going to read some of the comments and to see if you guys can help us with that. I mean, Deborah Bell said, I'd like to know what a specific plan for Cameron County. And then Lydia Garza said, if we want to gain trust and work with people in our Republican Party, let's not invite progressives that push for progressive policies to our GOP meetings for starts. Change is needed desperately in Cameron County. And then somebody said, Ann Stay said, we have a lack of proper conservative leadership in Cameron County.
Well, let me just jump in, and I'm going to let Adrienne and Morgan reply to the comments that are being made on Facebook. It's funny we're cracking down on Mark Zuckerberg, but yet we're on a Facebook platform. It's kind of funny. But let me say this.
Ironic.
For too long, and I've been watching the Republican Party in Texas and how conservatives operate for a quarter century. We're running these purity tests. And we're concerned if somebody has a little more middle of the road position, say, than a hard right conservative. At one point, let me tell you guys, because everybody in this set, Andrea and Morgan and Adrienne, y'all are too young, but I can tell you, I followed Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan had this rule, and it was the big tent rule, that if you're a Republican, you're with me. If you're a conservative, you're with me. We may disagree on certain policy issues, for example, on abortion, or let's say on school choice, or on a pathway towards citizenship, which, by the way, I don't support. I'm like one of those immigrant conservatives that believe that if you violate our border laws, our border policy, you shouldn't be rewarded with a pathway to citizenship. Yet I've got conservative Republicans here in Harris County that are for a pathway to citizenship. But at the end of the day, if we're going to dissect our fellow conservative because they don't agree on our position on abortion or on education or on immigration, our party is dead. So my suggestion as the old man in the room to conservatives in South Texas and all across Texas is we have big battles to fight. Let's not fight each
Absolutely.
other. Let's build a massive team and make sure that our Constitution is protected, that our liberties are protected. I may disagree with Morgan on maybe a couple of issues. I may not agree 100% with Adrienne, but they're my friends. They're fighting for my values, and they're fighting for my Texas, and I'm joining forces with them. So it doesn't do us any good, to the young lady that wrote us about, admitting people that are not quite as conservative. We're not going to win that way. We got to bring everybody in the tent. We got to hash it out, and then we kind of come up with a platform and a policy that we can all agree
on. I appreciate you saying all of that. In fact, we even had an event. And I know, two of those people who commented are actually the same person, and they are from, a newer ad hoc group that has refused to work with the Republican Party and other conservative groups. And I'm going to continue to reach out and continue to work with these folks as time goes on. And we need people to be willing to work with everybody, not just those they personally like. We also need folks to not say, hey, I have a personal issue with who you might run for county judge, so I'm going to go support, and we're going to help the liberal Democrat who's putting mask mandates on us. We're having people who have never voted in a Republican primary and refused to assist, actually putting more energy into trying to find an opponent for myself or for Republicans who can win, but haven't helped us in terms of winning in November. And this is exactly why, and you saw this, Orlando, that affected you all in Harris as well. You all went from having a Republican county judge and just a little more ground to stand on and have that taken away.
No, look, Morgan, I 100% agree. I love my fellow conservatives, and I've played in Republican politics, but when they're questioning of me about my interpretation of a verse in the New Testament, whether they agree with me or, I mean, that just goes beyond the pale. And this is where I've seen the party sort of start to disintegrate. And so we need to bring some sanity back to the conservative movement and come to the realization. We're getting a lot of comments on Facebook, and we appreciate you guys, and we'll try to read as many as we can. Uh, you know, we've got bigger battles to fight than our interpretation of a verse in the New Testament or the Old Testament, or if we disagree with our Jewish brethren or a Muslim or, Middle Eastern communities we're all Texans, for God's sake. And there are basic principles we all agree on, and that's what we have to rally around, is the bigger
Well, you
issues.
mentioned Zuckerberg. You mentioned Zuckerberg. One of the things I do when I'm trying to promote an event, especially since Facebook has shadow banned some things, I make sure to tag Democrats and known Democrats, especially if I know that they have a large and diverse following, some of whom I know for a fact vote Republican, and some of these folks may not know that. I'm privileged to have a lot of information that isn't widely available or isn't public information. So, if you see a Republican leader tagging a Democrat in an event, it doesn't mean that we're inviting him to join our party. It's because we know that it's going to multiply the audience that's going to see the information. We have to be smarter about this. We also have to beat them at their own game and beat them at their own algorithm.
I agree. I
And you're
100%
you're
agree.
absolutely right.
I
For
agree. I
example,
have,
this.
Morgan, I post a lot on my personal page, and I get a lot of folks from South Texas that are kind of, I can tell that they're Democrats that are struggling. I mean, I know that they're conservative, but they just can't bring themselves to cross the line. I agree with that. I engage them too. I don't hate my fellow Texan that happens to be a Democrat. I have a lot of Democrat friends. I mean, the only way I'm going to win them over is for me to share my views with them, not fight them, not insult them, not criticize them, but let them know that there are common areas of interest that we can all work together in. And so,
Um, I
yeah.
I think a good example too is that the Democrats historically they take care of their own. I don't know if you noticed, but Congressman Philemon Vela, he was appointed to the Democratic National Committee, so they don't eat their own. I mean, yes, there are conservative Democrats in the Valley, but a lot of them, and I'd like to say most of them, they do bow down to Nancy Pelosi when the time comes, and so they do stick together, and you have to give them that. But I think if we want to win, especially here in South Texas, our fellow Republican friends, our fellow independent conservatives, need to invest in us, not because they believe in everything we say. I'm a traditional conservative, but I still think that every voice in the party deserves to be heard. And I think that that's how we'll continue to grow is, encouraging individual freedom and continuing to have these events showing that all these different factions can do their best to work together. And going back to the whole scripture, and I've also dealt with some of that before, and I know as a traditional conservative how easy we can be manipulated. So I pay more attention to actions and what you do, day in and day out, not just during an election, to figure out whether or not you have the integrity or you're the type of candidate that I'll vote for. So I do think we need to work together. I don't think we need to compromise our values. I don't think that I need to be more progressive as a traditional conservative, but I do think that as an American, as a Texan, we can celebrate everyone's individual freedom to support and be the Texan that they want to be.
No question. No question. Well
Absolutely.
stated. Did you want to read a comment or two? Because we got a lot of comments on coming in.
Yeah, let's see. It
I'm
say
sure.
like say 50 Shades of Red in Harris County. Republicans must stop fighting amongst themselves before they can take on the Democrats. So
Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to take because, like any battle, you can't have a general that has a major or a colonel out there running rogue, right, and trying to destabilize the whole unit. You're not going to win the war. You're not going to win the battle. So we are
Yeah.
in a battle for the hearts and minds. And let me tell you guys that the transnational interests that exist out there, whether it's China, whether it's Russia, whether it's Venezuela, whether it's the Cuban regime, there are well organized forces trying to destabilize the United States. And so I'm just telling you, there are very far left liberal socialists bordering on communists that want to see our freedoms diminished. They want to see government grow. They don't want parents to raise their own families. They want you to raise them according to government dictates. I mean, we have a friend that was on an aircraft the other day, and they were sitting in first class enjoying some cocktails,
Oh my God.
and 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 the flight crew at United Airlines reported them.
Yeah.
4 New York City police officers escorted these ladies who really weren't disruptive. They were eating and drinking. And the police said, "Well, we have to respond, but you guys didn't do anything wrong."
And
I mean,
the,
this is the kind
United
of
can ban them, and they are in
yeah,
the
and
process.
they were banned,
Yeah.
so they can't travel in the United States on that airline.
This is
And I'm
ridiculous.
thinking this is absolutely ridiculous. This is what the left wants us to do. They want us to have a local Gestapo that watches what we're doing, eliminate our freedoms and our liberties and our ability to do what we want to do, within the law. And this is crazy. So there are forces that are trying to destabilize the United States. Do you guys think that it's by chance that tens of thousands of people from Central America, Latin America, Haiti just one day decided, hey, let's organize and go down to the Rio Grande River in Texas? No, that is a well orchestrated, well funded effort to destabilize the United States. Why do you think the Democrats turn their eyes to what's going on in South Texas? Because their policy is to eventually grant a pathway to citizenship and have every single one of these human waves that come over be voters in the United States. Put them in the urban education system where they don't learn anything about freedom and liberty and the Constitution and Western philosophy and what's made this country great. They're out to destroy that. And unless you realize that, your children and your grandchildren are going to have the same lifestyle that the people of Venezuela, the people of Nicaragua, the people of China, the people of North Korea, and the people of Russia, and the people of Eastern Europe lived. We've seen this movie before, guys. It's time to wake up. It's time to organize. Quit worrying about our interpretation of a Bible verse. Let's work together and make sure that Texas remains conservative in the foreseeable future. These two ladies are doing tremendous work in South Texas. If you can't get behind them and support them, then, as Ronald Reagan said, you're not inside our tent. So let's all get to work together. We want to thank both Morgan and Adrienne for the fabulous work that they do in South Texas, but more importantly, for taking 1 hour of their very busy day to be with us. And ladies, I look forward to going back down and visiting with you all soon.
Before you guys leave, call to action. What can people help you guys to help? Let's start with Morgan.
Absolutely. We need volunteers. We have a lot of folks who would like to see more things. And what we need are more human volunteers that will come forward, be willing to work with everybody, including our current volunteers, and to help expand on a lot of that. We are about to roll out something called our Conservative Activist Network Committee, which is supposed to be working with all of these groups that have just popped up over the last few months to help everybody get coordinated, get onto the same page, and so that we can grow our numbers and cover broader parts of the map. We have so many new faces and names that have shown up over the past few months and several months that what we're needing to do is catch up and identify everybody. And little by little, we're accomplishing that. But volunteers are a must. If you go to our website, www.cameronrepublicans.com, we do have a form that can be filled out where you can let us know if you would like to be on our mailing list, work elections. I know we have a small number of slots that open up from time to time between now and the amendment election due to people dropping out. And we do need that list because these are people who are going to be at the front lines next year during a very critical time. And also to sign up to volunteer or to be a precinct chair. We need as many people as possible. It's one thing to be angry. It's one thing to have opinions, but until you're on the inside actually working it and working with everybody, you really don't know. And that's where many of us can put our heads together, shake up the status quo, and also improve the processes.
Morgan, thank you so much. Let's go with Adrienne. Call to action.
Well, we encourage you to come to our grand opening on Thursday at 6 p.m. It's going to be a ribbon cutting. We're really excited because for the past 8 years, we were at a headquarters with about 1,000 square feet. And now we are at a headquarters with 4,500 square feet. We do have candidates. We want to encourage you to run for office if you feel called to. We have several events. You can go to our website at www.hidalgocountygop.us. You can become a DVR if you don't want to be part of the Republican Party. You can, and you still want to help the grassroots. You can become a DVR. You can also become an election judge or election clerk. You can come visit us. You can Google Hidalgo County Republican Party, and you'll find our office hours, our contact information, and location. But we do have a lot of candidates running for office that I think are worth consideration, as well as a lot of events. We do also need volunteers and more precinct chairs. Come learn more. You can visit our headquarters on Mondays from 10 to 3 and Wednesdays from 1 to 6. And God willing, we'll open up Fridays very soon. But thank you again. Thank you again for taking the time to hear the concerns way down here in South Texas. And we look forward to working and collaborating with several Republican parties throughout the state of Texas to help win elections in South Texas, Hidalgo County.
All right, Adrienne, excellent. I have one request. Can I get a personalized autographed copy of Texas Monthly with you on the cover?
Yes, sir. Most definitely. I'll ask for your address in just a bit.
All right.
Thank
And
you
also,
so much.
let me just jump in and say thank you. We literally have had hundreds of comments today.
Yeah.
I mean, there's too many folks watching us. Jeffrey Moen, Marisa Garcia, Raymond Romo, Deborah Bell. I mean, you guys are wonderful. Lily Hargrave. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We're running out of time. Our wonderful producer is hungry. He's got to go to lunch, and I got to go testify to make sure that Tejano, Latino, Hispanic conservatives get representation in the U.S. Congress. Andrea, despídete de todo el mundo.
Muchísimas gracias a ustedes dos, hermosas, inteligentes y pa'lante, para atrás ni para coger impulso. Gracias a las dos. Y thank you so much, everybody, for watching us today. We see you guys next Wednesday in TLC Live at 11 más o menos. And remember to go to our website, TexasLatinoConservatives.com, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. And also, I want to remind you about Leadership Latino, November 6th in San Antonio. Leadership Latino, November 6th in San Antonio. Please register and join us that day for an amazing session.
And don't forget to support John Lujan running for House District 113 in that special election. So John Lujan's been endorsed by the firefighters of San Antonio and the police officers in San Antonio, but you guys need to go out and do your job now. The election is coming up. We're going to be in San Antonio this Saturday helping John Lujan block walk, and then we're going to have a rally in the afternoon, so we're going to spend a lot of time down in Bexar County. See you guys next week. God bless. Thank you for joining us.
Nos vemos. Chao, chao.